USA Today interview he did, he's really doubling down on this notion that he believes that the president was possibly compromised by the Russians, which is one of the key parts of the dossier that the president has reportedly said is unverified and simply untrue.
That's right. And one piece of evidence here is he describes the way Donald Trump will not criticize Vladimir Putin even in private. We have an excerpt from the interview here. At least in my experience, he won't criticize Vladimir Putin even in private. I can understand why a president might not want to criticize publicly another leader in the interest of good relationship, but privately sitting with the person in charge of countering the Russian threat in the United States, privately not being willing to do that, that's always struck me. Jack Kingston, can you help us and help our viewers understand why the president won't go there with the leader of a foreign adversary in Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think the president actually did want to have decent working relationships with Russia, as were started by really John Kerry as respects Syria, and now we saw this weekend, that hasn't worked, and so we unleashed again on Syria.
But there before this weekend, there was an enormous amount of evidence of Russian aggression and misbehavior towards the United States, election interference, invasion of Ukraine, buzzing U.S. warships. I mean, we're 14 months into this presidency. Why wouldn't the president?
Well, as you know, moving NATO troops in the Baltic states is a big thing. Asking NATO nations to pony up more and doing joint exercises on the Poland border. Those are all things that Russia doesn't like. Not to mention the expelling the oligarchs and
I don't contest that. But personally, why is the president so reluctant in your view? The president is not shy, as you know, about criticizing many individuals of all stripes and parties. Why not?
I think actually it might be something just a little more superficial than anything nefarious. It might be that he just stubbornly doesn't want to do it because people are saying, why don't you say something critical about it? And but if you listen to Pence's comments yesterday, they were pretty doggone tough. I don't remember.
But I'm asking about
the vice president doesn't speak alone. Let's remember that.
It's also worth saying, Jack, that we also know, based on the reporting, that the president has been reluctant to do all of those things that you just mentioned, all of those tough measures that this administration has put forward. His aides are telling reporters he's been reluctant to go there, and that's been pretty consistent. The president himself, with his own words, with his own mouth, whenever he's given the opportunity, has always resisted criticizing Putin, with a rare exception in a tweet recently when he used Putin's name for the first time ever in a tweet. I mean, this is the president of the United States in a critical way.
He did quickly follow up that tweet by saying, but by the way, I want to...
Let's actually listen to Comey in his own words when he was asked about this notion of believing the president is compromised by the Russians. Here's what he told ABC.
Do you think the Russians have something on Donald Trump?
I think it's possible. I don't know. These are more words I never thought I'd utter about a president of the United States, but it's possible.
That's stunning. You can't say for certain that the president of the United States is not compromised by the Russians.
Yeah, it is stunning, and I wish I wasn't saying it, but it's the truth. It always struck me and still strikes me as unlikely, and I would have been able to say with high confidence about any other president I dealt with, but I can't. It's possible.
Wilma, your reaction?
A timeout here. Comey has a powerful message here. And the message based on facts is, if you're the president of the United States coming into office after briefings from across the intelligence community about interference in the American election, the first thing you do is look at your national security advisor, presumably before he gets fired, and say, you need to host a series of meetings. That's Homeland Security. Let me get real boring, Pamela. Homeland Security, FBI, CIA. And report to me every 15 days, 30 days about how going into midterms you're going to protect us. Show me one instance, and Comey talks about this. He talks about the fact that he did not have substantive engagements with the president about Russia. Show me one instance where the president has directed the National Security Council to meet. The problem I have here, and you see this throughout the interview, throughout the week, and in the book, is the difference between reporting of facts and what Jim Comey thinks. I think this. I judge this. I believe this. He's morally unfit. When he's on ground where he says the president didn't do this and therefore he was acting unpresidentially, I think he's fine. I think too often he slips into saying, I've got a personal view on this, and I think that colors the entire
in the interview with the USA Today interview we just posted, he goes a little further than in the ABC interview. He suggests that there might be finances, there might be obviously the golden shower tape as we now know it, but that it's beyond things. It might beyond that, beyond the stuff that we see in the dossier. It might be things having to do with finances and business. And again, to your point, Phil, I think there's no proof of any of this that Comey offers in the interviews, and certainly in the book. It seems to be a little bit more of ruminations based on...
It's an important distinction to make a claim that big.
But let me ask you a question. So you're the president. Let's imagine you're the president. You have just received a briefing from the nation's senior most intelligence officials, not just James Comey, but Jim Clapper, Mike Rogers, the others. They've just told you Russia has interfered in this election. And the reaction, according to Comey, but this is also corroborated by others who were in the room, was not, what are we going to do about this as a country? It was, according to James Comey, how are we going to spin this to our favor?
Well, I would do what Phil just said in terms of bringing the alphabet soup in of all the responsible agencies, and I might not do it right there, then and there. But
are you disappointed that your president did not do that in these circumstances?
No, I don't, because I got to tell you, I just can't give James Comey much credibility at all. Let me say this.
By the way, it's been corroborated by others.
By Jim Clapper.
Jim Clapper,
Just Comey saying.
But let me say, and not to pick on Jim Clapper, but I was on the Defense Appropriations Committee. We had a lot of classified briefings. Mr. Clapper did tell the Senate here and Chairman Wyden that we were not spying on Americans, and so I'm just saying not everybody's infallible
here. He's clearly been more focused on how it impacted the legitimacy of his presidency than anything.
He is the head of the FBI. For him to say they might have something on the president, it's a very, very serious statement. I would agree. Everybody would agree on that. If people believe James Comey, tomorrow the stock market will drop 500 points. It's not going to. The reason why it's not, it goes back to my point earlier. He's a political figure. He's a mad, disgruntled employee who was fired, and who, by the way, had a chance to bow out in January, but he hung on until he was fired. And the point is, he doesn't have the credibility.
You know what? It's a tenure term. Yeah, it's not just...
But the first... In this interview, though, the first thing he said, the president said, I understand you've been at it a while. If you want to...
He loved the job. He wanted to stay in the job, right, Evan? I mean,
but if the president was so repugnant to him, he would have...
Look, this assertion...
Quick final thought.
Again, this assertion that James Comey is some political figure, I do believe is incorrect. Look, I am extremely concerned that in hearing about what the Russians did in detail, Donald Trump is more concerned with his campaign image and spinning it for the polls or the cameras than he was about our actual democracy. And I think that's what folks are going to take from this interview.
Good thoughts there. James Comey portrays the president as a serial liar, untethered to the truth. We're going to talk about that just after this break.
So, what's new?
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us tonight. We are back with our special report. Comey speaking out. The fired FBI director sounding disdainful of President Trump in a new interview tonight, calling him morally unfit and portraying him as a serial liar. Comey says that he believes there is some evidence that Mr. Trump obstructed justice and that it is possible that he's been compromised by Russians. Really remarkable charges for the former FBI director to make. But really, this obstruction of justice question comes up frequently and relates to specific conversations that Comey had one-on-one with the president. I want to get to his descriptions of one of those right now, and then we'll talk about it. Have a listen.
Should you have said, Mr. President, I can't discuss this with you. You're doing something improper.
Maybe. Although, if he didn't know he was doing something improper, why did he kick out the Attorney General and the Vice President of the United States and the leaders of the intelligence community? I mean, why am I alone if he doesn't know the nature of the request? But it's possible that in the moment I should, another person would have said, sir, you can't ask me that. That's a criminal investigation. That could be obstruction of justice.
Was President Trump obstructing justice?
Possibly. I mean, it's certainly some evidence of obstruction of justice.
So, Michael Zeldin, you know a thing or two about the law. He's describing an encounter there where the president has kicked out or kindly asked Attorney General Jeff Sessions to leave the room, as well as Mike Pence, and said, can you let the Michael Flynn investigation go? Comey says specifically he felt the president was giving him a direction to end a criminal investigation. Is that obstruction of justice?
No, not in and of itself. It is evidence of the president's state of mind in the clearing of the room. And then you look at the exact words that the president said, which was, I hope you can see your way to let this go. Now, there's case law that says, I hope you can see your way to let this go, and that's found to be obstructionist behavior. And there's case law that says, I hope, which is aspirational and not obstructive behavior. So what Mueller has to do is look at the evidence of that meeting, speak to the parties there, determine what Comey felt, look at the memorandum that Comey wrote right after it, speak to Jeff Sessions and Mike Pence to say, what did they learn about this? See whether or not the president spoke to Michael Flynn about this. What is Flynn testifying about what he heard about the meeting? Did the president hypothetically say to Flynn, hey, don't worry, I asked Comey, we're all good? All of those things factor into the composite of what will be the evidence that Mueller will have to make a determination now with respect to obstruction, but not in and of itself.
I want to bring in Evan on that point, because what is important is that he is a credible witness. That is something that Mueller will look at. Given what we just heard from James Comey tonight in that interview, the interview USA Today, in the book, Evan, and elsewhere, is he a credible witness? Has his story been consistent from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is a credible witness. I mean, I think there are some problems with him. Obviously, if there was ever a trial against someone and James Comey is brought before to be a witness on the stand, I think there's plenty of stuff here that people like Jack and so on could point to and say that he is somebody who had a grudge against the president. But I think his story is consistent, and I think, like a lot of people, what comes across is that he's a man who is trying to wrestle with how to deal with a very unconventional president. And so that's some of what comes across here in the book and in some of the interviews. You sort of certainly get a sense of, he admits that perhaps telling the president that he wasn't personally under investigation may have been a mistake, because after that, Trump was after him to say that in public, and he was refusing to say that. So I think there are parts of Comey's story that certainly you can attack it, but I think he is consistent. He is somebody who's served 3 different presidents, and I think because of that, he comes across as somebody who is at least trying to do the honest thing.
I think his justification for his own actions are some of the most problematic parts of his interviews and the book, when he goes back and forth about why he did what he did. But I think what Comey does in this book is establishes himself as someone who recalls the events that actually occurred in an accurate fashion, and he compares that to the president, who has a very public record of retelling things incorrectly, or telling lies, or using falsehoods in an aggressive, offensive way. So Comey himself is setting himself up as someone who, at the very least, even if you don't agree with why he did what he did, recalls the things that he experienced in an accurate way.
Michael Zell, contemporaneous notes. He comes out of that room. He makes a conscious decision to sit down and say, I'm going to take it down word for word as I remember it. Are those evidence, as it were, in an investigation?
Sure. Okay. But the witness is called and said, what do you recall? Did you take contemporaneous notes? They can be used as evidence of his recollection of it. Sometimes you need it to refresh your recollection. Sometimes it's a past recollection recorded. There are different evidentiary methods by which things get in. But yes, they're probative of whether the witness is truth-telling when he presents his testimony orally.
But he also testified before Congress that the president had not tried to interfere with the FBI investigation, which is totally contrary to what he's saying happened in private.
Well, it's not exactly that way, Jack, but assuming hypothetically it was that way, then that would be something that on cross-examination he would be presented with. But the point that Jim is asking is, when you have a conversation with somebody and you can make contemporaneous notes of it because you are concerned about what is being said to you as potentially implicating law violations, it's an important piece of evidence. That's
and
the
we know
only
he also
came told other people.
Right, exactly. He came back from the...
But I'm just saying, his sworn testimony contradicted this. What I would do if I was on the other side is to try to prove that he's not credible. And I'm just saying his testimony contradicts what he said privately. And that wasn't the only case of that. You know, the thing that struck me,
he's been pretty consistent.
Can you be more specific in terms of how it conflicted?
Where privately did he say otherwise?
He testified before Congress that the president had not interfered with the FBI investigation of Flynn. That is contrary for him to him saying, yeah, he tried to lean on me about.
Did he actually interfere, or did he try to interfere? Those are actually two different things. So, I mean, it's not semantics; it's a real thing. I mean, if he testified.
Tonight, James Comey is defending his handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation, pushing back at Clinton, who says she felt like Comey stuck a knife in her back. And I want to talk more about this, but let's go actually listen to Comey directly from this FBI or from this ABC interview. Take a listen.
They say this crossed a line.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that. What I would hope is that they would, by reading the book, come with me to October 28th. Tell me what you would do.
Well, your critics say this is a clear double standard. You revealed information about Hillary Clinton. You concealed information about Donald Trump. That elected Donald Trump.
Take a step back and stare at the two cases and the posture they were in. The Hillary Clinton email case was public, and the counterintelligence investigations trying to figure out whether a small group of people, not Donald Trump, we were not investigating Donald Trump, whether this small group of Americans was coordinating anything with the Russians. We had just started the investigation, didn't know whether we had anything, so it would have been brutally unfair to those people to talk about it, and it would have jeopardized the investigation.
What did it feel like to be James Comey in the last 10 days of that campaign after you sent the letter?
It sucked. I walked around vaguely sick to my stomach, feeling beaten down, felt like I was totally alone, that everybody hated me, and that there wasn't a way out because it really was the right thing to do.
All right, so there's a lot to digest here, a lot to digest. And this has been one of the questions that's constantly raised. Why did James Comey handle the two investigations differently? Simone?
Look, James Comey clearly thought that he knew best, okay? James Comey put on his self-righteous hat from the moment that he sashayed out onto a press conference July 5th. And he did the same exact thing October 28th. I frankly don't care how James Comey felt. I don't care that the last 10 days sucked for him. He thought that he knew best, that he knew better. He bucked procedure at every single turn. And he clearly had some type of investment here in terms of the Clinton email investigation. It just makes no sense to me as a regular person listening why you can justify talking about Hillary Clinton, especially on October 28th when you really didn't know what those emails said.
Well, and that's a fair question. Why didn't you investigate a little bit more before you came out publicly just before?
And he seemed to undermine himself in that same answer. He said of the Russia investigation or the investigation into Trump campaign associates, they didn't know what they had at that time. And he said he thought it would be unfair to reveal information about this investigation, not knowing if it would lead anywhere. That's exactly the position he was in with those Clinton emails that had popped up. It turned out that there was nothing in them, and he didn't know anything about them at the time that he decided to come forward. So, you know, Comey is going back and forth on a lot of this stuff, but it doesn't make sense to a lot of people watching because the same explanation can be used. And also, the Clinton investigation was not public. Just because people knew about it didn't mean that that portion of the investigation was a public thing. So the idea that it warranted being revealed is just simply...
He clearly treated Hillary Clinton differently because she was Hillary Clinton.
There are a lot of moments in this interview where James Comey is, you know, he portrays himself as tortured over these decisions, almost like Hamlet, you know, sitting there, you know, should I have done this or done that? But FBI policy was pretty straightforward, was it not? That you don't publicize the status of these investigations, particularly in that time period close to elections. I mean, had he fallen back on protocol, it would have been a simple decision.
I think the moment of semi-honesty that he has in the book, and certainly in the interviews, where he talks a little bit about the fact that he was aware that he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. And look, everybody did. President Obama, people in the White House, some of what they
people
did.
In the Trump campaign.
Donald Trump.
People, right, people in the Trump campaign. I mean, we know people in the Trump campaign who were looking for jobs. Not you, Jack. But people who were looking for jobs because they assumed he was going to lose. So, look, everybody thought she was going to win. But the thing is, not everybody is the FBI director. Not everybody is bound by the way they're supposed to do business, which is not supposed to pay attention to what the polls say. And I think this is where he's sort of a little bit of out-of-body experience, where he's semi-admitting to things that we all know that he did. And I think, again, this is the first draft of his confessional. I think over time he's going to be a little bit more honest with himself as to why some of the mistakes he made, and they are mistakes.
But it's fascinating he hasn't just been able, at this much time, to ruminate, think about it, say definitively on a lot of these things, this was a mistake.
The audacity and the privilege that he displays is just egregious.
One of the things, though, that struck me is there was a kind of a softball tone to this whole thing, and this is where Stephanopoulos should have asked him, wait a minute, you spent, I think it was... he spent something like 10 minutes trashing Hillary Clinton on July 5th, and then he said, but she was extremely careless. How could you say that? That's against the FBI rule. They do not trash talk a private person. That's one of their rules. The other thing is, on October 28th, Lanny Davis has pointed this out. He had told Congress earlier that if we find something new, we will look into it. He did not say, as Simone said, he did not say we're going to sash out and have a big press conference about it. He did not have to do that. At that point, I think it was Comey all about me.
It was simple. It would have been very simple for him to stick with past practice.
Right.
Phil, you served in the FBI.
Give me a break. I mean, I spent 4.5 years in the Hoover Building. Two things you figure out within 5 days. Where's the coffee? And you don't talk about ongoing investigations. Forget about 10 days before the election. The mistake he made was in the summertime. A, he talked about the investigation, and B, he trashed an American citizen after he said the investigation is closed. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. You don't trash a citizen after the case is closed. When you go to close out, when you go to the fall, after that initial mistake, he's in trouble. If he doesn't say anything, somebody's going to say, well, you said it was closed, and we figured out 10 days before the election it's now open. If you say something, you get to where he is today. The answer is simple. Here's the coffee, and don't acknowledge an open investigation. That's it.
You know, though, the thing you can't miss when you look at all of this was that, as I said at the outset, I think that the July 5th press conference was unfortunate and violative of privilege, of practice. Same with October, even worse. So Rosenstein comes in, he writes this memo when he says, this is a reason to let this guy go. If the president had only kept his mouth shut and said, I'm acting on the advice of my attorney general, my deputy attorney general, and I'm letting the FBI director go because of the breach of protocols, we wouldn't even be here. Right. But he had to come out and say, you know what? That wasn't going on my mind.
He had to rub it in. He had to bring Sergei Kislyak and the Russian foreign minister
call him a nut job
into the Oval Office.
But the point was, that's right. But the point was, he said, the reason I fired him was because of Russia. And that's what is the whole reason we're here tonight.
And something that the special counsel certainly is interested in, bigger picture.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
All right, well, now that we've heard from James Comey, it was certainly only a matter of time before the president explodes on Twitter. We're going to talk about Mr. Trump, his reaction to everything Comey said about him tonight. He has to say about President Trump, this just the beginning of the fired FBI director's media blitz. A big question now, of course, is how will the president respond? Abby Phillip, you cover this president. Should we expect a tweet storm in the morning?
I'm sure there will be something. I mean, the president spent the weekend trying to message test some new labels for James Comey, trying to figure out exactly how to go at the problem that he sees in James Comey. But here's why I think this is going to be hard for the president. Comey has made it easy for a lot of Democrats to say that he hurt Hillary and a lot of Republicans to say that he's done things against Trump. And the president actually this weekend accused him of trying to want to get a job in the Hillary Clinton administration by restarting the investigation before the election. So the president is having a hard time squaring the facts here. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If Comey wanted a job, he would not have done something that a lot of Democrats say cost Hillary the election just on the eve.
Evan Perez, I mean, Democrats certainly not happy with a lot of his decisions, which Comey, struggled with, he says in the interview, throughout the campaign.
Right. I think what you're seeing is what happens when people decide to fight Trump with the same tactics that President Trump uses. Candidate Trump and President Trump. And I think that over the next week, 2 weeks of the book tour, you're going to see perhaps some diminishment of James Comey. People inside the FBI that I talk to, I think they're all cringing. They're all bracing for the fact that this is bad for everybody, including Comey and perhaps even the Bureau.
Well, in just a few days, Jake Tapper is going to be able to sit down with Comey for the former FBI director's very first cable news interview since President Trump fired him. You can see it Thursday on The Lead at 4 o'clock Eastern Time with Jake Tapper here on CNN. That is it for our special report tonight with Pamela Brown. Thanks so much for joining us, staying up late. The news is going to continue right now here on CNN.